Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm here today with Mike McKnight out of Utah. So, Mike, you want to introduce yourself and we can kind of take it from here?
Of course, my name is Michael McKnight. I'm up in northern Utah in Cache Valley.
Wait, was that me or was that
In
you
Smith.
with that noise? I think that was
I
me.
didn't hear a noise.
Okay, yeah, it's my computer then. Hold on one sec. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Crap, I can't hear you.
You can't.
Um, oh, crap. Hold on one sec, dude. I had a Facebook tab open and save as draft. Sorry, I was uploading a video. And then I forgot that that tab was open, and then somebody commented on something and it made that ding noise. So
Uh,
I guess that's why you didn't hear it, but I heard it, and I don't want it to accidentally be in the recording. Okay, so we'll start again.
okay.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm here with ultra runner Mike McKnight. Mike, do you want to give yourself a brief introduction?
Of course, my name is Mike McKnight. I'm up in northern Utah in Cache Valley, Utah. And I've been ultra running for about 7 years now. I started in spring of 2013. My first race was the Logan Peak race that local ultra runner Jim Skaggs puts on. Um, Fell in love with it very quickly. Did my first 100 just a year after that, and yeah, ever since I've done multiple hundreds, a few 200s, and then most recently did the 100-mile run without consuming any calories. And aside from ultra running, like I'd say the thing that I'm most passionate about is my family. I have a wife and two kids. My oldest son is 3 years old. His name is Killian. And my daughter, who we just had 5 months ago, her name is Oakley. And aside from running, I spend most of my time with them. So running and family is pretty much what sums me up right now.
That's not a bad gig, right? You spend time with people you care about and get to go out in the mountains and the trails.
Yeah, it's a perfect life right now. I wish I had a job, but it's as perfect as it can get without a job.
I guess that's why you have time to run 100 miles with no calories, right?
Yeah. When I told everybody I was doing this, they were like preparing to follow me along on Saturday, and I was like, "No, I'm going to do it on Friday." And they're like, "Oh, why?" And I said, "Well, I don't have a job, so I can do it whenever I want."
I guess that makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
Specifically, that's what I want to talk to you about. Like, we've known each other for years through Ultra and other things, and now you're running for Solomon. But but yeah, when you announced that you're going to do 100 miles with no calories, it was interesting to hear feedback from people. There was a lot of, I don't know, positive, negative, and a lot of people thought you wouldn't be able to do it. Other people were super curious about it. So how did you get this idea to run 100 miles on no calories? Like, it just seems insane to a lot of people.
So, um, so when I started ultra running, I when I started ultra running, I was about 190 pounds, which is a heavier weight for a runner. Um, and I was finding myself in this like vicious cycle where I would struggle at my races because I would try to eat as many calories as I felt I should have to get the energy I needed. But because I was a bigger guy, I was eating a little bit more. And so my stomach had a hard time digesting the food that I was eating. And so I started puking a lot and just kind of had ultra lows and wasn't really enjoying the ultra. Like I was enjoying the training, but I wasn't enjoying the racing because of how often I was getting sick. And then I would go into another race and try and lower my calories because I didn't want stomach issues. And I ended up not having stomach issues, but I just bonked hardcore because I wasn't eating. And so I was either too tired or too sick in my races to really enjoy it. And so, as you said, I was with Ultra for about 4 years. In my job with them, I was the athlete manager. And we had an athlete summit in Zion, Utah, and I was driving. We like flew in all of our elite athletes to Salt Lake City, and we rented vans. And I picked up about 6 or 7 athletes from the airport, and one of those athletes was Jeff Browning, and that was my first time really meeting him. and he and I shared the front seats together. I was driving, he was in the passenger seat, and it was about a four-hour drive or so to Zion from the airport. And anyone that knows Jeff knows that he can talk quite a bit about fat adaptation. And so I can't remember how the conversation came up, but he started telling me about it and telling me why he does it and the science behind it. And it really, really intrigued me because he mentioned that you could eat less while you're racing and still have a sustainable amount of energy. And so I adopted the low carb keto lifestyle pretty quickly. And it was a game changer for me because I had energy at my races. I rarely ran into stomach issues. The stomach issues I did have was just because I didn't fully understand keto, and I didn't realize I needed to up my salt intake. So, once I figured out all the kinks of a low carb lifestyle, I was able to really not have gut issues anymore. And so I started doing some studying and learned about a doctor named Dr. Jeff Volek, who does a lot of research in keto and endurance athletes. And I remember he pointed out once that even the thinnest athlete, like somebody with 7% body fat, still has about 40,000, roughly 40,000 calories stored, 40,000 grams of fat stored up in their body. And so, theoretically, that's enough fat to last them for days if they're in a state of ketosis. And once I heard that, the question just always popped in my head how far somebody could go without eating calories. And with the whole COVID thing happening and races canceling, runners are looking for things to do right now to still challenge themselves. And so I started wondering if 100 miles was possible and started talking to Jeff Browning and Zach Bitter a lot about it, and picked a date and just decided to go for it to see if it was possible.
It's definitely worked well for you. Like the Triple Crown 200s and all that going on. Like it was pretty inspiring to see that happen. And then I don't know, like, so it's interesting. What kind of prep did you do? Because obviously you're still training and everything, but everyone assumes you need a carb load for something. And quote unquote carb loading in ketosis is very different than a standard like pasta dinner you see at events, right?
Right. Um, so like, a carb load for a keto athlete is a little bit different than a carb load for like somebody who's a little bit more carb dependent. Um, I think the number is, it's roughly around 2,000 grams that like your body can hold in terms of carbohydrates. And American, like, their diets are already so rich in carbs that when you carb load, before I did keto, I'd like go to Olive Garden and do like the unlimited pasta buffet kind of a thing. And like realistically, that was unnecessary. Like just having one pasta dinner would have topped off my glycogen storage, even though it was probably already topped off before I went there in the first place. So what I do in my preparation for a race is I go pretty strict keto about 10 days before the actual race happens. And so, in this situation, the 100-mile fasted run, I went strict keto, borderline carnivore, about 10 days to 2 weeks before. And then roughly 48 hours before I did it, the fasted run, I upped my carb intake and went from about 30 grams to about 150 to 180 grams a day. And none of it was pasta or breads or anything like that. It was just a few servings of fruit and vegetables, a couple sweet potatoes. So it's not necessarily a carb load per se, like what you think of when you hear that term. But the biggest prep I did for it was just really lowering my carbs a few weeks out and just really tapping into the fat storage and a little bit of intermittent fasting and just getting used to running fasted for a couple of weeks before I actually did it.
Yeah, a couple hundred grams of carbs is nothing for like I guess a typical runner, right? Where they're just consuming carb after carb after carb after carb consistently before,
Right.
during, and after workouts and stuff.
Yeah, until you like start trying to do keto and low carb, you don't realize like how many carbs are actually in other foods. So like, keto, like pistachios and a lot of nuts are like something that you can theoretically eat, but if you're really tracking your macros and looking at how many carbs you're intaking, like even if you're just eating a couple handfuls of nuts, like there's carbs right there. So unless you're just eating strict meat and eggs, like a carnivore diet, like you're getting some kind of carbs from something. And most of the foods that we eat is loaded with carbs.
Yeah, especially all that processed garbage that's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. The sugar industry is kicking our butts.
That's for sure. Well, let's talk about like the day before you started. So on Instagram, you were posting about it and everything. And what did you have for dinner? I think you had like a sparkling water and steak or something. Is that what it was?
The dinner before the night before I did it.
Yeah, the dinner and then also your breakfast. Like, what did you do for kind of that routine?
Yeah. So for dinner, I had, it was an elk roast. I had elk roast. Um, I think man, I don't even remember. It was an elk roast. I'm pretty sure sweet potato and an arugula salad, which is a little bit more carby than what I would have in like normal day to day. So it was definitely like a type of a carb load for me, but again, not like the standard carb load. So elk roast, a little bit of carbs. I had an orange. Um, and then the day of, so I started the run at 6 a.m. and I got up at 5 and had breakfast at 5:30. So for breakfast, I had bacon and eggs. I had another orange, and then just about 10 minutes before I started, I had a spoonful of coconut oil, and then I took off.
Which to most people, a spoonful of coconut oil is disgusting, but it's actually
Yeah.
pretty.
Well, yeah, it used to be disgusting for me. I don't know if that's the same for you, but now I love it.
Oh no, it's great, man. Like I love that flavor and like the kind of that subtle coconut flavor, and uh,
Yeah.
doesn't gross me out at all.
And typically too, like after a long run or a hard training block, like I'll occasionally buy myself either like a Lily's dark chocolate bar that's sweetened with stevia and not sugar.
Mhm.
And like I'll break that off and sit and watch TV and I'll dip my chocolate in coconut oil. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, I guess before we jump into, I guess, your recovery with chocolate, let's talk about how the day went because you're looking on Strava is 18 hours and 40 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay. So how did that go throughout the day? Because yeah, it was 0 calories and everything, but you did bring salt, magnesium, and potassium with you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So
So
how did you go about supplementing with that and like fluids throughout the day?
yeah, so the biggest thing like that Jeff Browning talked to me about and a couple other people like Zach Bitter and there's an athlete named Mikey Skylar who's tried this a couple times. Biggest advice that they gave me was keeping the heart rate low. And so I guess taking a back step, a couple weeks before I did this, I started like I had Sunto. They sent me a heart rate strap for my chest because up to this point I've just been using the wrist monitor, which is a little bit inaccurate. So a couple weeks before they sent me a heart rate strap for my chest, and I started running by heart rate. And the advice that they gave me and the science for like optimized fat burning is for my age and everything. And I guess another back step is I've never tested anything, so I don't know like what my max heart rate is and all of that. So we just kind of had a range that we guessed on, and that range for me was between 120 and 135 beats per minute. So I started training every day, not a lot of intensity, just keeping my heart rate in that range. So my body got used to fat burning a little bit more while I was training. And like I said, I was intermittent fasting for 2 to 3 straight weeks. I would only eat between 1 and 7 p.m. And then I would do my run at 11 a.m. So I was running every day at the tail end of my fast. So between the heart rate running and the running at the end of my fast, my body was definitely running in ketosis for a couple straight weeks. And so the whole day, the route that I designed was here in Cache Valley. And I designed the route. There's only about 5,000 feet of vert, which is not a lot for 100 miles. And I designed it so most of that vert came at the very start when I was a little bit fresh, because I found in my training that any kind of hill spiked my heart rate quite a bit more and slowed me down. And for this, I had a goal of doing it in sub 20. So, I woke up, I started, and the first 30 miles was mainly the only trail part where all the vert was. And kept my heart rate in that range. I was feeling good, and just all day I was ahead of my splits by quite a bit, until about mile 60, and that's kind of when I started to slow down to the sub 20 pace, and was able just to kind of maintain that for the rest of the day. But to answer your question about the salt and magnesium, I just had 2 bottles of water, and I designed the route so I'd go by families' houses, friends' houses. My wife met me a couple places and filled my water back up. Then every hour or 2 hours, I'd lick my finger and stick it in the bag of salt, and then just suck off of my finger whatever stuck to my finger. And then I'd do the same to the bag of magnesium. I do the same thing to the bag of potassium. And I did that every couple of hours. And the reason I did that was just because if I took a pill, like a capsule, technically there's some kind of calorie in that capsule, and I didn't want to do that. So I just licked my finger and stuck it in salt and magnesium every couple hours, and gurgled it around with water and kept going.
How did that go for you? Because well, one, it seems a little unsanitary just to be dipping your fingers in bags like that. But you just carry bags around with you, or how did that work?
Yeah, I just had my Solomon vest, and just I had they each were in their own Ziploc baggie. I was originally going to like mix them all in one bag and shake it up, but um, I didn't need as much potassium as I would have needed salt, and just because of the different ratios of how often I would need them, I decided just to put them in their own bags. And like I only did the potassium every 3 to 4 hours. I did the salt almost every hour, and then I did the magnesium like every 2 hours. So I split them up just so I knew what kind of ratio I was getting throughout the day, instead of just hoping I had a pretty good ratio in a mixed bag, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. How did that feel though, doing that? Like, were you fine? Did you get cramps? Like, how did that go?
No, I had no cramps. Like the day, in terms of how everything went, it was uneventful because it went so well. Um, the biggest thing that was hard was like, I know how often to take S caps in races. Like I know what the ratios are in those pills, and I know how often I need to take them. Whereas this was just kind of a guessing game. So there was a couple times, especially in the heat of the day, when I was doing it a little too much, and my stomach started to hurt just a little bit, just because I was overboarding it. So I would say that was the hardest part with this type, with the way I was doing it, was it was just a guessing game. And in retrospect, I probably should have like picked a certain time like every hour to do it, whereas I was just doing it randomly. So
Yeah,
aside from, sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So aside from like a couple random like stomach didn't feel good in the heat of the day, like I had a sustainable amount of energy for most of it. I did slow down in the second half, but that's typical for a race. I didn't slow down drastically. Like when I was feeling good at the start, I was averaging about a 10-15 pace. And then once I got the vert over with, I sustained that 10-15 pace for probably the next 25 to 30 miles. And then the pace just kind of dropped to a minute to 2 minutes slower per mile after that. And I just kind of stayed in the range of like 9 minute to 12 minute for the rest of the day. And no cramping, no muscle, like I did have muscle fatigue, but like not severe muscle fatigue like I thought I would have. And it just just kind of plugged along, and nothing seriously bad happened. Never thought I would not finish. Never had to give myself a big pep talk. It just happened, and it was uneventful.
That's kind of what it seems like. Like it couldn't have gone any smoother because, like, looking at your Strava, your splits are relatively even. Your heart rate was 125 on average the whole time. Like, that's pretty incredible and mind blowing to a lot of people, like myself included. Like, it's awesome.
Me too.
What were you thinking about, like, when you're like mile 99? You're like, oh crap, I'm actually gonna finish this, or were you just wanting to
um,
run?
yeah. I mean, like, so Mikey Skylar. He's tried this twice now, I believe. And he commented on one of my Facebook posts. He was just like, keep the heart rate low. You can do this. If you go too hard, you're not going to have like the typical ultra bonk. You're just going to have pure on muscle failure. And so when he said that, that like kind of like scared me a little bit. And like, especially when I was going faster than I thought I would be going, when I was getting to like I was supposed to get to my sister's house, which was mile 25. Like I told her it would be around 11, and I got there at like 9:45, almost 10. And so just like when I was like going faster than I thought I was, like I kept having this nagging thought in my head throughout the whole day, like, is there just going to be some random moment when I'm running and my whole body just seizes up and I fall over and like I just legit can't walk because my muscles gave out. Like the term that he said, muscle failure, really scared me. So, you know, once I hit mile 32, which was like my PR for how far I've gone fasted in the past, once I hit that, like it was all unknown territory, and I was just kind of anxious and thinking that that was going to happen. So when I got to mile 85, 90, like, and my muscles were feeling really good, I wasn't scared anymore and was just stoked that it went so perfect. And it was just, yeah, it was just a good feeling to get to my house, to get to the finish.
Man, I bet. So how did you feel after? Like, what was your recovery process like?
So I finished Saturday morning at, it was just after midnight. So it was like 12:40 on Saturday. And I finished, and the first thing I did was I drank, one of my sponsors is Gnarly, and they make nutrition. They have a little bit of electrolyte for race day, but mostly they have recovery type stuff, BCAAs and protein. So the first thing I did was I drank a Gnarly protein shake, and then I tried to sleep because, I mean, 12:40, that's still gonna be a good night's sleep theoretically, but I was not able to sleep at all because my body ached so much. And I feel that that is because the course that I did was 65 to 70 miles road. And I am a trail runner. I don't run on the road that often. So I feel that the pain I was feeling was mostly because I did a lot of road running. And so that day, you know, like Saturday morning when Sarah, my wife, woke up and we spent the day together, she did mention that I was limping a lot more than she's seen me limp after a race, which I again still feel is because it was mostly on road. But all day on Saturday, I took a couple Epsom salt baths. I have a massage gun I used. I have recovery boots. I stretched, and come Sunday, I was feeling normal. Monday, I felt great. I went for a mountain bike ride with no issues, and today I'm probably going to go for a run for about an hour, which is quite a bit quicker than other races that I've done in the past. So I would strangely say the recovery is going better than most like 100-mile races experiences that I've had in the past, which I can't figure out why.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to talk to Browning or Bitter about that and to see what their thoughts are on it.
Yeah, when I told Jeff that, he didn't have too much of an answer. The biggest thing that's like kind of mind blowing to me is like my hunger is a little bit opposite of what I thought it would be. I thought that these first few days I'd just be going to town, that I'd be super, super hungry. But I mean, yesterday I didn't eat until 2 o'clock, and I kind of forced myself to eat at that point. I had some 80/20 ground beef cooked in some eggs, and that filled me up the rest of the day. I didn't eat dinner. I still haven't eaten this morning. Like for some reason, my hunger is not there. And I don't know if that's because like I'm in a deep state of ketosis. Jeff doesn't really know either, but I'm just kind of forcing myself to eat right now. That's the only thing that's kind of different.
That's interesting. Like, it seems like after, and Zach Bitter has told me this before, that like when he wraps up a long race or something, he definitely focuses on on his meat intake, like more red meat, and like granted he eats meat in general, but having more. But it's interesting that that you're just not that hungry. Like you would think you'd want
Yeah.
more, like you'd want something after running 100 miles is nothing. But then again, the deep ketosis thing makes sense.
Yeah. And like the day after on Saturday, like I did, because Zach and Jeff, they told me that quite a bit too, that upping the red meat intake and the protein intake to get into protein synthesis right after a big run like that is key. So on Saturday, like I finished off that elk roast for breakfast. For lunch, I had a bunless double patty burger. For dinner, I had a 16-ounce sirloin. So I mostly ate meat the day after, and maybe that's why I'm not that hungry right now. Like I just had a ton of protein, and well, I don't know. I did eat a lot of meat, like they coached me to, and I feel like that has a play into why I'm recovering so well, because even though I am low carb, and I do fall into the trap sometimes after a race where like I'll reward myself with a couple of things that I don't eat that often. Um, and so I feel that there is some science behind upping the protein in the red meat right after a long run, because I'm definitely recovering better than I have in the past, and I'm eating a little bit better than I have in the past too.
Yeah, it's interesting how I guess your diet can affect everything so heavily, right? You
I
eat a bunch
know.
of sugar, you're gonna have high inflammation. It's just science.
Yeah. Like, I did the the Triple Crown of 200s in 2017, which is those 3 200-mile races that Candace puts on for those who haven't heard of it before. It's 3 200-mile races in the span of 2 months. And when I did it in 2017, that was the year I started low carb and keto. And between those races, I didn't understand the concept of grains being inflammatory. Um, that is just one of the few things, well, one of the many things that I missed when I was studying keto. And so in between those races, like I definitely went to town on junk food. I was like, I just ran a 200 miles. I deserve this for the next 5 days. So I had like breaded onion rings, breaded chicken fingers, breaded cheese curds. I went to town on like the deep fried breaded stuff because that's what I loved. And like, I'll have to send you some of the pictures I have on my phone, but like my legs were so fat after those races because of how much grains and inflammatory foods I was eating. I had like those like what are they called? The shakes that Dairy Queen makes that they like tip upside down.
Of blizzards.
Yeah, the blizzards. I was eating like 3 of those a day for a couple days. Like I was going to town on the breading and the sugar, and it really showed an inflammation that I had. And at the time it didn't make sense. I just thought it was because I ran a big race. But now that I've studied it a little bit more, like I was just pumping my body full of foods which are inflammatory. And ever since I've learned that and haven't done that after a race, it's amazing noticing how rarely I get inflamed. That alone is just like a big reason why I'm going to stick with this, just seeing how beneficial it's been for me when I've stuck true to it compared to the times that I haven't.
Yeah, like I remember just at Bigfoot 200, the first of the Triple Crown, and you were 50K in, whatever the aid station is there on Mount St. Helens, and you were just throwing up and awful. And then I was like, okay, like maybe this keto thing's not going to work for him too well. And then at Tahoe, when you finished, your legs were super inflamed and
Oh,
it looked like balloons basically.
yeah, they're terrible.
Yeah, but it's interesting how you've dialed it down so well over the few years. And obviously it takes a lot of trial and error, but it seems like you've got it like a pretty good system going.
Yeah, and I owe I owe all of that to Jeff. Well, I owe all of it to Jeff. He's my coach, Jeff Browning, and then a lot of it to Zach Bitter, because even though he's not my coach, he's a super nice guy. We've had a lot of phone calls about it, and I mean, even if you just like Google their names, all the podcasts that they've done, like 90% of the time, the podcasts that they're in, they're going to be talking about fat adaptation. And so definitely their knowledge and their research has helped me dial it in these past few years. And I was telling you, I think it was last week, like I've just gotten to the point like those 2 days that I carb loaded, quote unquote carb loaded for my fasted run, like it's getting to the point where like it's a chore to eat carbs. Like I just love I love eating protein, and like I feel good, like I lean out, and mentally I feel amazing, and it's getting to the point where I don't even care for carbs anymore. And I know that probably sounds stupid or hippie.
Well, well, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to people that aren't fat adapted, because when say they cut carbs for even a day, it's like you start craving carbs. Like you want sugar, you want bread, you want anything with carbs in it. So it's
Yeah,
interesting how your body
totally.
can change over the years.
And like, Sarah, my wife, she's been trying to cut back on Dr. Pepper. And there's this like product out there called Zevia, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
It's like a carbonated drink that they don't use sugar to sweeten it, they use stevia. And so there was one day I decided to try one of those just to see what it was, and like, oh my gosh, it was so sweet. Like like it almost made me sick. It was so sweet. It's just, once you cut out carbs, like soda waters, like soda waters are almost too sweet sometimes. It's
Yeah,
kind of
and
weird.
I, I know you and I have both been drinking Spindrift, which is basically just carbonated water with like lemon juice or lime juice in it, and
Yeah.
they're delicious. But sometimes I'm like, oh man, like this is almost too much sweetener, and it's just a little bit of fruit juice. It's not even anything. It's like half a gram of carbs, maybe.
Yeah, totally. It's really really nice how the body does that.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Um, just speaking of bitter, I know we're backtracking a little bit here, but I'm heading down to Phoenix tomorrow actually, because he's going for the 100-mile treadmill record, and then also the 12-hour treadmill record. And it's going to be interesting to see how that goes for him.
Yeah, I think he's rocked it on the track, so I don't know why he wouldn't rock it on the treadmill.
Yeah, and he's so calculated and deliberate about everything. Like he has everything just planned to the T, which is amazing.
Yeah, like when you talk to him and Jeff, like they're so articulate in what they're saying, and that they know what they're talking about, and like I could just sit and listen to them talk all the time. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, like I love hearing them talk about it, and it's good to have that information from a real source that knows what they're talking about, and not just somebody in some keto group on Facebook saying this and that. Because
Right.
maybe like they're doing keto to lose weight or something, but they're not an athlete by any means. They're not running 100 miles a week or anything, or 100 miles fasted.
Right. And I definitely categorize myself as somebody that would just be in some keto group on Facebook. Like there's still a lot I have to learn, and um, I'm definitely not as well knowledged as those two are on the subject, but they're helping me slowly get there. There's just so much to learn still.
Yeah, I guess it's a process though, right? Like you only learn so much at one time, and just slowly learn throughout your life and just learn and grow.
Yeah, I feel like I ask Jeff questions all the time still, and like I feel like I've asked all the questions, but somehow I keep finding more to ask.
Okay, just real quick, like basics. Like if somebody wants to jump into like fat adaptation or even like doing fasted runs, like do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, definitely listen to podcasts with Jeff Browning and Zach Bitter. Look up Jeff Volek and Stephen Finney in terms of like doctors and pushing a keto diet for endurance athletes. Those two are pretty high up there, because we're still in the point where like mainstream is pushing that you need carbs, and doctors, a lot of doctors aren't necessarily on board with the whole keto thing yet. So they have a lot of good research. Again, it's Jeff Volek and Stephen Finney. But in terms of just like bullet points, like starting out, the biggest advice I give to people who love carbs is to start out slowly. Maybe pick like a food group that they think that they can do without, that's high in carbs. So I have friends that ask me about it, and the first thing I typically tell them to start eliminating is breads and pastas. Not necessarily to worry about cutting out fruits or veggies or any of that stuff, but if they can just go some time cutting out breads and pastas, then that will help them immensely when they like try to go full on. So start out slowly, cut something out like that. If you can, cut out as many sugars as possible as well. I'd say that I would add that to those two. Those three are pretty big to cut out. But in terms of like runners and stuff like that, when you're ready to go full on into it, you know, by definition, like a keto diet is around 30 grams of carbs a day, coming mainly from green vegetables. Um, so when you start out, just, you know, target your macro, your carbs to that number, and be prepared for your training runs to be a little bit slower than what they have been in the past, just because you're basically putting your body into the bonk that you would experience in the middle of a race. Because when you do bonk in a race, your body depleted its carb storage, and so it's not sure what to do at that point. So by eliminating most of the carbs in your day-to-day diet, you're forcing yourself to go into that state daily. So your runs are going to suffer a little bit, but that's okay. Like all of us that try to adapt to it, we've all gone through that. Just hang in there, focus on low intensity, focus on hiking, find some hills, and that's totally okay. And then once you adapt, like, which could take anywhere from 3 weeks to a couple of months, um, you'll start noticing your runs will pick up a little bit more, and kind of ride that for a little bit. And, you know, after a while, and this is like, it's hard to, this is where Zach and Jeff do better. They can like summarize things a little bit better than me. but you know, after a couple months, once you're adapted, you can start introducing a little bit more carbs into your day to day, especially after a big training run. And yeah, just so eliminate the grains, eliminate the bread and the pasta. um, Keep your training low intensity for a couple of months, and then just slowly start introducing carbs back in again around your big training runs. um, and all of your runs during this time, like the adaptation phase, should be fasted, um, just because that's going to help you get used to running fasted more often. And then a few months later, you can start having carbs again on your run, but just focus on doing all of your runs fasted when you start working on a low carb diet.
Cool. That's some good advice.
Yeah,
Just to kind of wrap
kind
it up,
of
like
better.
just to kind of wrap it up, if we wanted to follow you on social, where can we find you?
Just Facebook. My name is Michael John McKnight on Facebook, and then my Instagram name is Dirty Mike _89.
Awesome, man. Well, it's good chatting to you about it. It's super interesting to hear about how you ran 100 miles with 0 calories. I'm intrigued, and a lot of other people are too.
Awesome. Well, thanks for giving me the chance to talk about it. It was fun, and it's it's an intriguing topic for me, and I hope for others.
Yeah, definitely. All right, man. We'll have a good rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thanks, buddy.
Yep. Talk soon.